All right, I think we're live.
We're live. Hey everyone, my name is Jen Hawkins and I'm so excited you are here with us tonight. I am thrilled that Justine Froelker is with us. Is that the way I say your name, Justine?
Yes.
My name is Jen Hawkins. Okay, good. We are so excited because if you were at convention and you heard Justine come out on stage and talk about vulnerability and courage and shame, then you were probably like me, stay up there, just stay up there. We want more. So you're going to get more tonight. I'm super, super excited. Justine is a certified Daring Way Facilitator based on the research of Brené Brown. And I know we have a lot of Brené Brown fans out there in Plexus land. So we are so lucky to have you. And she was just telling me that there are only 1,500 worldwide facilitators of this curriculum. So it is very, very special that she is on with us tonight. And we are very, very fortunate in Plexus that she is ours. So Justine, without further ado, because you have the meat tonight, I'm going to hand it over to you. Super excited.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So hopefully now I'm on the screen. We'll figure it out. Okay. So thank you. I love this work and I love how much it applies to what we do on a daily basis. And it was an honor to tell a little bit of my story at convention, and it was honestly a dream come true. And so to get this chance to teach even more of the work to everybody in Plexus is just really a blessing. And so thank you, Jen, very, very, very much. So a couple things. One, an update, because I don't think she's gone totally public with it, but Brené's next book is on leadership. And it comes out in October. So you can pre-order it already on Amazon, which I should probably let her know that she owes me all these pre-sales because everyone's now going to go buy it. But so yeah, I think it's literally called Brave Leader or something like that. So we got that email the other day. I was like, that's going to be perfect. So tonight I am going to share a little bit about my story because it totally applies of how I found Brené and her work. And then I'm going to share really 2 lessons from the Rising Strong curriculum. So as a certified Daring Way Facilitator, we have right now 2 curriculums. There's rumor that we're going to have another curriculum on the gifts of imperfection. And we are the only people that can teach this work. We have worksheets and videos that only we have access to. It's all trademark. Brené, at the end of the day, is a brilliant, brilliant businesswoman. And so the first curriculum was the Daring Way. And then I facilitated that mostly in individual sessions for about 2 years. And then Rising Strong came out, which is that's my favorite book of Brené's. You should probably start with the Gifts of Imperfection, though, if you're not super familiar with Brené. So Rising Strong curriculum then came out, and it encompasses a lot of the Daring Way, but there's 16 lessons in it. And tonight I'm going to share pretty decent snippets of 2 of those lessons and how they apply to our Plexus business. So I want you to for sure grab a pen and paper, number 1, because I talk really fast. And number 2, because I'm going to ask you to take some notes in regards to thinking about certain things when I go through certain things. Also, you might want to grab some tissues. I cry every time I'm on teach and video, and will probably cry too. So it's okay if you don't, though. But so just a little bit about me. So I always knew I would be a therapist. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been in the field for 19 years. I just retired from seeing individual clients on Thursday. It was my last day with a client. I am scared to death, but it's God's plan, so we're going to go with it. But I always knew I wanted to be a therapist because I had 2 back surgeries in high school, and I spent a year of my life in a body cast. And that totally plays into how Plexus came into my life too, or what it's done for me. But because of those back surgeries, I was told my entire life that I should write a book. I never thought I would write a book, but then because of those surgeries, we went through an infertility journey. And so we went through gestational surrogacy. Michelle Ziesmer, which I know some of you guys know her, she's actually my primary leg in Plexus and one of my best friends, and she was my surrogate. And we met on a website. And our story is a whole other call, to be honest. But so after infertility journey, because it did not work for us, we lost 3 babies and we lived what I call a child full life. I mother mothers, And I have lots of kids in my life that I like to be at their games and their concerts and things like that. And I raise butterflies and have other weird things that I've worked really hard to have, like to work on my definition of happy. And so after our infertility journey, I was in the deepest, darkest hole of my entire life. And I read Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection, and it changed my entire life. And I knew I had to see her speak. And so I looked up how to see her speak, found her at a conference at Emerging Women. I could not afford to go, but I went and I had to go and that's what actually helped me write my book, Ever Upward. Well, by the time I got there to Emerging Women, I already had been accepted to be a certified Daring Way Facilitator. So as a mental health therapist, I started my career in substance abuse because that's what I did in college. And I stayed there for like 4 years. And then I fell into working with clients who struggle with eating disorders. And then once I went into private practice 11 years ago, I did mostly anxiety and depression. And then we had our infertility journey. And after doing my own work, I specialized in grief and loss and infertility and things like that. But really, the last 5 years, I've done Brené's work because it is the single most powerful work in my personal life, in my professional life. It changes everything. And if you don't know anything about Brené Brown, just watch her TED Talk. Start with her TED Talk. And again, I recommend The Gifts of Imperfection. So I watched my friend Sam, who I talked about at convention. I went to college with her, and she started using Plexus and has a great IBS testimony. Her kids, have a great testimony, all these amazing testimonies or things like that. And she was bugging me to use Plexus, and I did not need it. I had lost the 35 pounds from infertility treatments. I had gotten off the meds. I didn't think I needed it, but I started it to really shut her up and to support her. And little did I know how much better I could feel and look. So, obviously I have all the usual Plexus testimonies that we know, that we hear every day. So I'm not going to share those, especially because I want this to stay compliant. But the biggest one of mine is because of my 2 back surgeries and spending a year of my life in a body cast. My surgeries were in 94 and 97. So back then we didn't know what we know now. We know now about moving your body. They literally stuck me in a body cast for 6 months, each surgery. And so I have a ton of scar tissue and trauma in my life. And plus, I was misdiagnosed for a year and a half. So my body was just a mess. And so once my inflammation came down in my body, and I also added ease and nerve, my entire life changed. I used to eat ibuprofen like it was candy. I used to eat 4 to 16 a day, depending on my activities for the day. And I have not had any ibuprofen in almost 4 years. So if you ever need one of those testimonies, feel free to pull me into that conversation. So that's a little bit about me. And so let's get into the teach, because that's why you're all really here. So first off, I'm not going to reply to comments on this because they just I want you to get as much information as possible, but I encourage you to comment on the YouTube link, which you're all watching on. Only Jen and I are on the Hangouts. But please comment there, and I will come back. It might take me throughout the week, to be honest, because I need to work my Plexus business. I'm going for Emerald, people. So it might take me the whole week, but I will respond to your comments, especially if they are questions. Okay. So if you have questions, please make sure you put the question mark so I know that needs a response. Okay. So please comment there, because I believe in engagement, and this world needs more brave people, which is why I'm so passionate about teaching this work. So first off, we're going to start with vulnerability, because most of us think we know what vulnerability is, but we really don't. So in the data, Brené's data, she does it's called grounded theory research. And so even some of my alumni who have done my workshops and intensives, we all kind of struggle with one concept, which that's for my advanced training. But I'm not going to talk about that on this one because it's just too hard. But even my husband will struggle with some of my concept. He's so Brené at this point. It's pretty awesome. But you can't really argue with grounded theory research. Because what it means is it's not quantitative, like, 75% of people or 100% of people who use Joyome for 8 weeks have fewer wrinkles and lines. That's amazing. But like grounded theory research, it's like stories are the data. And if she has an outlier, if she has a story that doesn't fit where all the other stories have been, she's not looking deep enough. And so she has to keep looking. So what she writes about in her books is kind of just truth where we are in our society culture right now. That's also one of the reasons that she's never written about grief and forgiveness until it came to Rising Strong, because she didn't have the data yet. It's also why she doesn't write about much spirituality and faith. It's hard to find like saturation in that data. So this data, it's kind of just true. You don't get to argue with me about it. You get to receive it and check yourself on if you're struggling with some of it, what's the story you're making up about it? And like, what's it bringing up in you that you're struggling with it? Okay. So we're going to start off with vulnerability. So in the data, vulnerability, Brené defines it as emotional exposure. So we're going to talk about our feelings, risk, which we're Plexus ambassadors. So we might not be as adverse to risk, right? However, I'm going to bet that there's people on this call that are not sharing in a vulnerable way, who are not contacting their best friends and family about joining them, who haven't shared at all. So you do have an aversion to risk because it's vulnerable. So emotional exposure, risk, and then uncertainty. And I'm not sure I've ever met a human being who liked uncertainty. I keep joking. Like I saw my last client on Thursday. I keep joking that I could really use a crystal clear text message from God with zero undertones. Like I just need him to tell me what to do and what he's doing. But that's kind of like not how he works. And I just need to be quiet and listen. So emotional exposure, risk, and uncertainty. The number one word that comes up in the data when we ask people what is vulnerable or what it feels like to be vulnerable is naked. I feel naked. I feel exposed. So in the data, what comes up is 4 myths of vulnerability. And I want to go through them. Even if you've read her books and you've done this teach with me on other team calls or whatever, you always will hear this information differently. So I encourage you not to zone out. 4 myths. Number 1 myth of vulnerability, and it is probably the strongest myth, especially in the American culture, is that vulnerability is weakness. I mean, think about it. We're told not to talk about our feelings. We're told that you shouldn't cry at work. Men are told that they should never cry. We are taught in many ways still, even though I know the world is starting to change, especially because of Brené, that vulnerability is weakness. And it just, there's not one piece of data that she has found in 16 years of data that supports that. Vulnerability is always courage. Always. Vulnerability is asking for the raise. Vulnerability is the courage that it takes to fire someone, the courage that it takes to get up after you've been fired, to say, I love you first, to try to get pregnant after you lose a child. Like vulnerability is always courage. It is never weakness. So that's myth number 1. Myth number 2 and 3, I think sometimes go hand in hand. Brené doesn't always teach them this way, but I do. So myth 2 is that you can do it by yourself. Myth 3 is that you can opt out of it. So in other words, I hear this a lot, like, oh, I love this vulnerability thing that you are doing and that you teach all the time and that Brené talks about, but like you're extroverted. I'm going to go home and like practice by myself. Nope. Not how it works. I don't care if you're the most introverted person in the entire world. You are still wired for connection. Wired for it. You cannot run from it no matter how hard you try. You don't get to do vulnerability by yourself. It's about connection between 2 people. That 3rd myth, that you can opt out of it, you're a human being. You just can't. To be in relationship is to be vulnerable. To be alive is to be vulnerable. You don't get to say, like, that's good for you, but it's not my thing. Like, you don't. Because it basically means that you're a walking shell of who you once were without the ability to ever go back. And you'll never be able to show up and be you. So you can't opt out of it either. The 4th myth, the last myth of vulnerability, is that vulnerability is oversharing. So this might be one that is most like misunderstood the most, because I think a lot of the times, like especially in the world of social media, People say like, we don't have a vulnerability problem in this culture. Look at how much people are sharing on social media. People could say that about I write memoirs. My books are about my life. People could say that about my social media. I am vulnerable. I believe it's Jenny Allen. She's the author of Nothing to Prove. She believes there's a distinction between vulnerability and transparency. In the Brené Brown work, we call it vulnerability and intimacy. So I am very vulnerable. I'm pretty transparent too, but because I think sometimes I use those words interchangeably. I am vulnerable in my social media. I don't share the most intimate details of my life on social media because vulnerability is not oversharing. Vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. Boundaries is a whole other lesson. I love me some boundaries. If you watch Therapy Thursday, you know I love freaking boundaries. So vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. We share our lives with the people who have earned the right to hear them. One of the lessons that we do in the curriculum is rumbling with criticism. And you have to write down in a tiny, tiny box the names of people whose opinions really matter to you. And guess what? It's not your whole team. It might be one person on your team. It might not be anybody on your team, to be honest. But like, those are the people who have earned the right to hear my intimate details. What Jenny Allen calls transparency. Vulnerability must have boundaries, okay? Because otherwise it's just oversharing. And a lot of times we'll overshare because we want to hotwire a connection. Like we meet somebody and we've like realized that like, oh my gosh, we have so much in common. I think I want you to be my best friend, right? And we just like, we vomit all over them. And that is not vulnerability, okay? So those are your 4 myths. It's a weakness. I can do it by myself. I can opt out of it, and that it's oversharing. None of them hold water. The data just doesn't support them at all. Within those 4 myths are the 2 paradoxes, which I love. And I shared these at convention, which I have, they're like Jen sent me a video of my convention talk, and actually Lana at Corporate's trying to get me one. So I've been kind of waiting to put it up on YouTube until I can get that cut of it. But I talked about these paradoxes. So the first paradox is that vulnerability looks like courage in you, but weakness in me. Also, it's the first thing I look for when I meet you. And it's the last thing I'm going to show you. So wrap your head and heart around that. Like literally write that down. Move it from your head to your heart through your hands. We do that in the Rising Strong curriculum. Courage, vulnerability looks like courage in you, but weakness in me. And it's the first thing I look for when I meet you. And it's the last thing I want to show you. This applies to our Plexus business. This is why sharing vulnerably and in a wholehearted way is so important. Because when we share about our lives and about how our products in this business have changed our lives in a true vulnerable way that people can connect with, they see that as courage. And it's the first thing they're looking for. And because vulnerability builds trust, that's going to start to open their heart up to trust us so that it starts to build and feel like courage in them, that they'll begin to want to show it to us and maybe ask for our help or ask for more information. Or, like I said at convention, when you cold message them, they're ready to hear. So remember that paradox. So if you haven't already, I definitely want you to grab that pen and paper now. So first question, I want you to literally just jot down a couple words. This is not a narrative. We don't ever do narratives in the Rising Strong curriculum. For as wordy as I am, it's kind of surprising. But we move what's in our head to our hearts through our hands with very short bullet points. Just get it out, okay? So number 1, first question is, what does vulnerability feel like to you? What's it feel like? For me, it is my home. It's how I stand in my sacred truth every day. And it still scares me to death. My heart was racing before I pushed start broadcast. Like I said a prayer, like before I pushed that green button. vulnerability is uncomfortable. And if you feel comfortable with it, you're not doing it right. So what's vulnerability feel like for you? My second question that I want you to take some time, and if you want to come back to it when you journal tonight as part of your nighttime routine. How did you believe growing up? Like, what did you think about vulnerability growing up? And this is not as simple of a question as you may think it is. I want you to think about, was it spoken but not modeled? Like, were you told that you could talk about your feelings, but your parental figures didn't do that? They never talked about it, and they definitely didn't show it. Was it mixed messages when it came to spoken versus shown? Also think about, was it different or same messages if you were the male child or the female child, or the youngest or the oldest? Or perhaps you had a sibling who was sick, or you were the sick sibling. Was it different messages for that? Because a lot of us did not grow up in families where we were encouraged to get curious about our emotions. Most of us grew up in families that when we said we were scared, we were told to get over it, buck up, chin up, dust yourself off. We weren't encouraged to get curious. And we didn't sit across from parents who said, tell me more about that. What's going on? Because they weren't taught it, right? Our parents did the very best that they can, or that they could, and they still are. Just like you are if you're a parent. So think about those mixed messages. So I always use my family as an example. So my parents did a very, very good job of breaking very unhealthy patterns. I have pretty strong addiction and mental illness on both sides of my extended family. And my parents did great. Our love language is words of affirmations and talk and quality time. So they did a great job. And at the same time, I'm a lot. I've always been a lot. And I went through some major trauma. And what I found is that I had this mixed message of like, you can tell us and feel all your emotions and talk about it. And then the famous saying was, chin up, Justine, which I have no doubt wired me for resilience. I mean, I spent a year of high school in a body cast. I needed resilience taught to me, sewn into me. And at the same time, especially through this work, I've learned it was a message of, you're a bit much. You feel too hard. Don't be so dramatic. Chin up. Tighten it up. Stay in the middle. Your family probably had a saying. I've heard a lot of them. So think about those mixed messages that you had about vulnerability growing up, because they are influencing how you practice vulnerability in your family and especially in your business. One of the most famous ones we hear in my workshops and intensives is, my mom told me I could tell her everything, anything. And then when I told her, she freaked out. She raged and hit me, or she raged and cried and would go up to her room for hours. So you tell me that I can tell you about how I feel and I feel safe enough to talk about it. And then when I do tell you, it's no longer a safe environment. And to a child, that is a very mixed message about vulnerability. So think about how that has influenced your family and your business. Where does this come in to your business? And I know I will not make some fans on this. I know that, especially because I know there's a huge movement right now with some trainers in network marketing that are not teaching vulnerability. They teach vague posting and they teach really vague messaging. And I don't, even if I got a fast paycheck off that, I wouldn't be okay with it. Because when I share about what Plexus has done about for my life, for me, business and products, and I just share about my life and not just the good stuff, we can still share the struggles without being negative, because we can always choose to do the work to see the gifts in the hard parts of our lives in the dark. And your loved ones and your Facebook audience and your Instagram audience, the people who you want to try Plexus and join you, they want to know all those parts because they are looking and yearning to see some of them in you. And that's only going to happen if you share about this in a vulnerable way, in a wholehearted and vulnerable way. Because when you do that, they feel connected to you. And connection grows trust, which means your relationships deepen. And at the end of the day, it's those deep relationships that will make loyal customers and teammates that are so different and can love each other and talk with one another and grow with one another through difficult times, because you have that trust, because you know about each other's lives, even if you didn't know each other before Plexus. That's where this vulnerability comes in. It comes in to a sustaining team, a team that trusts each other and can learn and grow and rumble through the hard parts together, because they have some of this language and they're not scared to show up, flaws and all, and stumble and fall flat on their face. And also at the end of the day, everyone is selling something, and we've got a ton of competition in supplements. And what's going to set you apart from your competition, in your social media especially, is sharing in a vulnerable way. When you let people see you and your heart and your life, and that you're just coming from a place of service, that's going to draw people to you. That builds that trust up. That's why I do not like graphics. I have a problem with graphics. I just scroll by them. I scroll by them even if they're from my own team, because I want to know about you. I want to see your face and your great life and your hard life and your pets and your cute kids. That's what I want to know about. So that vulnerability piece, if you're going to do this, if you're going to do wholehearted sharing in a vulnerable way, you got to get ready, because you're going to fall on your face. You're going to fall like flat on your face in the arena floor, like face marred by dust and blood and sweat, like it says in the Theodore Roosevelt, the man in the arena. Like, it's not the critics who count. What is important when I am face down in the arena is that I have a clarity of values, which that's an advanced training too. But like, I need to know why I'm doing this. So we talk about that in Plexus all the time. Know your why. Know your why. How does this business and how's your team and these people in your life and these products help you stay in alignment with who you want to be? And if you don't know who you want to be, awesome. Go discover her or him. And you start with your values. How do you want to live in alignment with your values? How does Plexus align with that? And share that with the world, because you're going to fall flat on your face when you do this in a vulnerable and wholehearted way. That also means that we better have some skills to get back up. So in my intro training, I always share this part of the curriculum because I love it. And it'll just be one of those parts that you're just like, oh my gosh. And it just gives you new language, and it's awesome. So basically what happens, let's say, well, I mean, it's happening right now. Literally, my best friend, suspected autoimmune, refuses to stay consistent on Plexus, has not given it a fair shot at all. She's actually an esthetician, and I've tried everything to fix my skin. And what's helped my skin the most? You guessed it, Joyum. If you've seen my before and afters, they're shocking, because I've been struggling with hormonal cystic acne for the last year and a half. So, but it's so hard. And it's like today I was like, you want to try something? Like, I could use like some points. Like, how you feeling? Want to give this a try again? HC's out. Like, because I will reach out until people tell me to stop. And in almost 4 years of sharing, I've had 2 people tell me to stop. We're not bugging people. Come from a place of service and bug them. Bug them. But like, she keeps telling me no, like, or just not responding and ignoring me. And we've had that whole conversation of like, okay, do I not bring it up at all? Because you mean more to me than Plexus, all of that stuff. And like, she knows how passionate I am about this, and I'm not going to stop until she joins me, because I have the belief that everybody in my life will be on Plexus by the day I die. Like, I don't know that's how strong my belief is. I don't know why people keep arguing with me about it. Like, whatever. So, but if I did not have this work, and I was not willing to get curious about how it feels to have one of the biggest people that you want to join you not join you after all this time, if I wasn't willing to get curious about how that feels, I would offload my hurt. So in the curriculum, Brené has found 6 ways that we offload hurt. So in your notes, I want you to write down a couple questions. I'm going to go through these 6 ways, but as I'm going through them, I want you to keep in mind a couple things. Number 1, do you do this? Do you do this? Number 2, what'd you see growing up? Like, what'd your mother figure and your father figure do? And then number 3, what are you seeing on your team? Because I know you'll see these patterns on your team. And when we have this new language, it just creates so much grace and space to rumble with stuff. Because I can kind of see that, like, if I do it, I'm like, oh crap, just offloaded her. Like, or I can see someone on my team and she's struggling and I'm just like, all right, she's chandeliering. She's totally not wanting to rumble with something right now. What's going on? Okay. So these 6 ways that we offload hurt. Number 1, chandeliering. The chandelier stuffs and stuffs and stuffs and stuffs the emotional pain until it has nowhere else to go, because newsflash, you are not an endless black hole that you can keep stuffing your emotional pain. The chandelier then shoots through the roof or hits the chandelier at the smallest comment, at the slightest annoyance. That's the chandelier. Chandeliering environments are like walking on eggshells, and there's no level of trust in them because you never know what you're going to get. So that's the first one, chandeliering. The second one is bouncing hurt. Bouncing hurt actually has 3 ways that we bounce hurt. So think of it this way. Our ego, really likes to be in control, and bouncing hurt is the doors, like the doormen, like the bouncers that protect the ego. Anger. So you're just mad all the time at everyone and really resentful. Or you avoid and you say, I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it. I'm done. I'm over it. It's fine. Whatever. It's good. Whatever. I don't care. You avoid. Or you blame. You don't ever take personal responsibility and you blame anything and everything for everything. There's a hilarious RSA short on this. It's Brené's voice put to a cartoon. She's a blamer. So am I. And she, like, her husband, Steve, stayed out late for water polo or something, and she had to have a second cup of coffee. She spills it all over her white pants, and Steve calls from work because he's a pediatrician. She goes, hi, Steve. And he's like, what happened? And she's like, I spilled coffee. What's the first words out of her mouth when she spills coffee? Damn you, Steve. That's a blamer. Okay. So that's bouncing hurt. You're mad all the time. Anger. You avoid. I don't want to do this. I'm fine. Whatever. I'm good. Or you blame. When I say, damn it, Chad, and he's not even home. The third way, probably the number 1 way, numb. We numb. As I say, when it comes to my 777 happy challenge that I have on Facebook, the Netflix, wine, and ice cream don't love you back. When we numb, we pretty much take anything to take the emotional edge off our pain. Pick your poison, because unfortunately, even the healthy stuff can be numbing. So numbing, favorite ways to numb are sex, drugs, drinking, food, exercise, perfectionism, people-pleasing, caretaking, binge watching, perfecting your kids, overscheduling, busying, working. It's just constant change, planning, control. Pick your poison. Are you numbing? Now, I do enjoy a decent Netflix binge on a rainy day. And to a fly on the wall, it might look the same as numbing. I know if it's numbing or not. We must check our intentions. If I am doing it because, I'm hanging out with Chad and it's quality time and we're eating good food together, cooking good food, and then we're talking about the show and I'm feeling filled up and like nourished, that's self-care. If I'm escaping, avoiding, that's numbing. And that's a way that we offload hurt. The fourth way, stockpiling. Similar to the chandelier, stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff. But instead of you like shooting for the moon, the stockpiler, they're sick. Stomach aches, anxiety, depression, indigestion, heartburn, autoimmune, because the stress and cortisol has built up in your body that much. Our bodies are the wisest parts of us, and our body keeps score, and it will always win. And I know that we all know that it's blood sugar and gut health and inflammation. And it's also a ton of unprocessed emotional pain. If you are not willing to deal with that, you will stay sick. No amount of Plexus will fix that because you've got to deal with your stuff. So that's the stockpiler. Then you've got the high-centered. That's the fifth way. High-centered. So think of like the car stuck on the median. You know, like you roll over the median and you get stuck. And if you go forward, you scrape. If you go backwards, you scrape. So high-centered is like you've shared vulnerably a little bit with Plexus and like you feel pretty good about it. It's maybe gotten you one teammate and like you feel good, whatever. And like you're just really scared. Like you cannot go forward though. Like you are scared that if you go all in with this, you will not be able to shut up. You won't be able to stop crying. You cannot let people know what's really happening in your life because you just can't undo it. But you also like feel good about it. So you can't go backwards. That's high-centered, or as I call it, stuck. And as I have told my clients for my entire career, stuck is a choice. We might have two really crappy choices, still a choice. And stuck is always one of them. But it is a way that we offload hurt. To not make a decision is to make a decision. And finally, the last way that we offload hurt is the umbrage. So if you are a big Brené Brown fan, you know that she has a Harry Potter reference in all of her books. Dolores Umbridge is the character that wears, the pink suits with ruffles and the pillbox hat, and her like office is decorated in cat plates, and she is horrible. She like tortures children. So the umbrage is that person, and we all have one at least in our life, and it might be you. This is the umbrage. Oh my God, I love you so much. Of course, I would love to help you with that. Oh my gosh, I love you. That sounds so amazing. You are so great. And I just hate your guts and want to punch you in the throat. That's the umbrage. The umbrage is someone that you walk away from and you're like, what just happened? Like, she's a ticking time bomb. Like, she's not integrated. That's the umbrage. We all have dark and light. We all have hard parts of our stories. Our job is to integrate them into our whole self and to stand in our sacred truth. When we offload our hurt in the umbrage, we're not integrated. So when it comes to these 6 ways of offloading hurt, what basically happens is when I live my life in a vulnerable way, I will be shamed, blamed, judged, and criticized. Guess what? If you think you're actually perfect and you're struggling with perfectionism, and if you think that'll actually make you escape being shamed, blamed, judged, or criticized, you have another thing. Like, no, it's just not true. That's a lie that perfectionism tells you. And perfectionism is shame. Perfectionism is shame. When perfectionism is driving the car, shame is riding shotgun, and fear is the backseat driver. You can never escape shame, blame, judgment, or criticism in this life. And trust me, when you know that you've done it in this sacred way, this wholehearted way that is in alignment with who you want to be and with your values, when we are shamed, blamed, judged, and criticized, it hurts. But I know I did it because it was my truth. It also sometimes hurts more because it's my truth. If I'm not willing to get curious with how hard that is, I offload it. And when I offload it in one of these 6 ways, that is not in alignment with my values and who I want to be. And so when you get that no from your loved one, or it's crickets on that really good Facebook post that you loved and worked so hard on, you got to be willing to get curious about what it's bringing up for you. Get curious about those emotions. Refuse to offload it anymore. Cope with it in a healthy and effective way, which is through breathing and mindfulness and the permission to struggle and the grace that it's okay, and to practice some self-compassion and work on that self-talk, not just a positive mindset. We have to talk about beyond that. We have to talk about the shame stuff that we all have, because shame is the deeply painful feeling of being flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And we all have it. And your Plexus business is going to itch it, ignite it, trigger it a ton because you love it. And when you're sharing it in a vulnerable and wholehearted way, you love it even more. And it feels like more is on the line, which means you're going to feel more shame. You were feeling it all along to begin with. It's just you didn't know what it was, or you didn't call it shame. And now you know what to do with it, or a little bit, because I've shared some of the curriculum with you. But like, I have the trigger. I'm willing to get curious about it because I don't want to offload it anymore. So I'm going to cope with it in a healthy and effective way through my self-care and through breathing and mindfulness and permission to feel and struggle. Again, that's a whole other call. You can subscribe or watch all of my other trainings, or there's tons of them galore at this point. And then I get to really realize what's rumbling up for me. Is it shame? Is it anxiety? Is it trust? Is it boundaries? What is really coming up with me? And what's the stories I'm making up? Take that mantra. If the only thing you remember from this call is that, like, what's this really about? What's the story I'm making up? My second TED Talk was a hilarious story that was fairly embarrassing, but it was about that. Like, your response to people is about you. It is not about them. And people's response to you is about them. That includes when they respond to us in certain ways when it comes to Plexus. It's their stuff. And I want to be able to say that I have done it in a wholehearted way that's in alignment with my values and standing in my sacred truth. Because when I am doing it in that way, I can be proud of it. I can trust it. And I know that the right people at their right time and God's time will come to me when they are ready. And I know then too, when I fall flat on my face, when I miss that rank that I was so close to, or when I fall in points, I'm going to be able to say, I'm doing it in alignment with my values. I'm doing it with my whole heart. I'm doing it from a place of love and service. And that's what matters. And I still got to be willing to rumble with what comes up for that, which is like not enoughness and impatience and criticism, all that stuff. So that is literally the smallest tidbit of this work. One of the other mantras I always like to share, kind of to end it, I guess, because I know some of the big network marketer trainers, like don't care about what anybody thinks. And in the Brené work, we don't say that. The people who are shouting that from the rooftops are actually the people who care the most. I need to care what you guys think of this call. I care because I want you to feel connected with me. I want you to feel connected with the work. I want you to feel connected so that you can feel the courage to go freaking do it yourself. I care what you think because then I can connect. I, however, will not be defined by what you think. Because when I'm defined by what you think, I lose my capacity for courage. So as I've watched those numbers fall in the corner, of course, shame makes up a story. We started at like almost 500 viewers. Now we're almost down to 400. Shame makes up a story so fast, it's not even funny. Oh my God, it's too much. They don't even like it. You suck. Maybe technology is not even working. Like, who do you think you are that you could actually do this? Who do you think you are that anybody cares about what you have to say? That's how fast shame works. And it knows how to get you. For me, my shame story immediately attaches to my infertility story. You're not a mother. You're not enough. You're invisible. No one cares. So fast. And I know that those stories are my stuff, and it's my responsibility to rewrite them. I first must get curious about where they're coming from. I first must get curious about what they rumble up for me. The shame, the criticism, the fear, the vulnerability. Because it is there that I get my thinking brain back on track, and it's not just shame crap writing my story. When I slow down my physiological response, take the deep breath, become mindful, and give myself permission to be scared and struggle a bit, and to name it, I become the author of my life again, and I get to rewrite the story. That's how this work applies to this business. When we do this from a place that is in alignment with our values, standing in our sacred truth, and loving others well, we will fall flat on our face, first off. And most of all, people will see some of them in us, and they will connect with us. And that builds trust, and that deepens relationships. And maybe that's all that's supposed to happen. I'm willing to bet they'll join you in Plexus eventually, though. So that's what I got for Teach. Even after convention, I had so many people ask me like other resources that I have. So I do have an online course that I put up, that I put the Brené Brown curriculum, a lot of pieces into network marketing. So it's an online self-paced video course, which is a blessing and a curse all in itself. Let's be honest, because it's self-paced, so you can fall off track of it super fast. But it's self-paced, you can do it at your own pace. So if you want a little bit more, that's a great place to start. I also have, if that's a little bit too much for you, like I do a 7-day, 7 minutes a day for $7 happy challenge. I'm running it 2 more times this summer. And then I have a 66-day one coming up because that's how long it takes to make a habit. I'm hoping to maybe launch some masterminds in the fall. I no longer work with individual clients because I am retired, because I am going Emerald. And I love to teach this work. So if you are a leader and would ever like a workshop or an intensive or a class, we can talk about that. So I believe that this work can really be what sets Plexus apart from all of our competition if we are willing to do the work. And it's not easy. I'm not going to lie to you about that. I mean, if you guys do follow me on my YouTube channel, you see me cry almost every week. So but it's real. Okay. And I'm a lot, and I own my allotness now. So, and if you can't handle it, that's all right. Maybe I'm just not your people. It's fine. So I really, really, really appreciate everyone being here. Thank you for sacrificing some of your Sunday night. I know for some of you it's pretty late or pretty early, and I will get to your comments, I promise. And please feel free to share this within your teams, because I want braver people in this world. And I want people who are brave enough to do this work alongside me and not just watch me do it. I want you to actually do the work. Stop just reading the books and taking the classes and actually implement them. So thank you very much for being here, and have a good night.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Good night.